Welcome back for another book talk video. Today is Suspense Saturday, and I want to talk about Stephen King's book, If It Bleeds. It's taken me a long time to get to the master of suspense, the king of suspense, if you will, Stephen King. I actually bought this book this summer, and I was super excited to read it. But you know how it is sometimes you get a book and you set it in a pile. And it just sits in that pile, and you read a bunch of other stuff, and eventually you see that pile again. You go, oh, I want to read that book. That's what happened here. I did enjoy the book. I think that it's a great read. On Goodreads, I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. And you know, if I give it 3 stars, that means it's good and I recommend it. If It Bleeds is a collection of 4 short stories. You could call them novellas, I suppose. They are all brand new from Stephen King. The first one is Mr. Harrigan's Phone. The second one is The Life of Chuck. Then you've got If It Bleeds and Rat. All 4 stories were written extraordinarily well, of course, because it's Stephen King. The first story was my favorite out of all 4 of them. I was reading the story just thinking that that story itself was a 5-star story. The way that it talked about this young man's childhood and how he grew up and what was going on in his town, how he got a job reading novels to an old man, all of that. It was really fascinating. And of course, it's a ghost story. I love the way that Stephen King puts together these ghost stories that make you question reality and make you question whether or not the spirits are up to something. So I really enjoyed it. The second story in the collection, The Life of Chuck, I enjoyed less. It was very weird, very out there, which is not always a bad thing, but it was told in 3 acts, and it told Act 3 first, then Act 2, then Act 1, and that was because the real horror mystery element was back in Act 1, really. So you got to see the devastating effects of things in Act 3, and you got to learn more information in Act 2, ultimately bringing you to Act 1. So, the story of a man's life, but in a strange sort of way, because in Act 3, where the story begins, it's about the fact that the man has died, and the world seems to be falling apart. It's an apocalyptic sort of tale, which is part of why it's weird. I'm not sure exactly what the message was that Stephen King was going for that one. So it's that story, The Life of Chuck, that made me kind of lower the rating overall for the book. And then you've got 2 more stories. If It Bleeds has the character Holly Gibney, who is apparently a recurring character in Stephen King's works. Though I have to admit, I've not read the Bill Hodges trilogy of Mr. Mercedes, Finders Keepers, and End of Watch, and I've not read the book The Outsider by Stephen King, so I was not familiar with the other stories that this character's in. But apparently this character's from the Finders Keepers detective agency, working on a missing dog case, and there's a school bombing. There's a lot that happens in the story. It's a good story. I suggest that you check it out. I personally just read the book in order, just because that's what I wanted to do to be able to review it, but the way the stories are written, you could pick up the book and read any of the stories that you want, read them out of order, however that you want to do it. If you wanted to, you could get the book and just read one of the 4 stories. And then the last story is called Rat, and it's got Drew Larson. It's got a writer who's got some issues, but it was basically a new spin on the old Monkey's Paw story, which is always fun. Overall, like I said, I believe it's a 4 out of 5 star book, though to me the first story in the book was the best of all. Though if you're a fan of Stephen King's other books, you might really enjoy If It Bleeds the most with that character that you would have seen in other books. And I do like when authors do that. Alright, that's it for today's book talk. Every day is a good day for a book talk. Peace.